Hey, Katie. We have the Bungalow Mystery, and we are on Chapter 9, A Valuable Inheritance. If it had been possible, Nancy would have started out for Melrose Lake at once, but she felt that Laura needed her. Besides, there was a job to do for her father down at the Browns' barbecue the next day. Helping Dad comes first, Nancy decided. Laura spoke again of her mother's affairs. She used to say I'd always be financially independent if anything happened to her. We'll find out, Nancy said, then took Laura upstairs so she might shower and rest. In the meantime, Nancy selected some of her own clothes for the visitor. When she appeared at the dinner table, Hannah declared that Laura looked pretty as a picture and much more relaxed. I am, thanks to both of you, their guest said gratefully. When the meal was finished, the two girls sat out on the Drews' porch. To cheer up her guest, Nancy told Laura of her funny experience with the French poodles while trying to get volunteers for the youth center. The young detective did not mention her real reason for calling at the apartment. Laura giggled. I wish I could have been with you, she said. Tell me, Nancy, have you any souvenirs of the mysteries you've solved? 2 trophies. Nancy displayed a mantel clock and a valuable silver urn. Laughingly, she told Laura that her father often said she would have the house cluttered before she finished her career. Just then, the telephone rang, and Hannah called from upstairs that Mr. Drew was on the line. Nancy hurried to talk with him. Nancy, I've come across some evidence that indicates Mr. Hamilton, or some person working for him in the trust department, was behind the security thefts. A detective is tailing Hamilton, and if he tries to leave town, the Monroe police will be notified. How about the others in his department? Nancy asked. They're being watched too, but not so steadily. Of course, we don't want to arrest an innocent man. Nancy said she hoped the guilty person would make a misstep soon so the case might be solved, and told her father what she had learned of the River Heights suspect since she had seen him. He suggested that she keep trying to contact the Dowds. And that reminds me, the lawyer said, you can forget about Mr. Herbert Brown being suspicious. He explained that Brown was a personal friend of the bank president's and had been cleared. Nancy was relieved to hear this. I'll keep trying to get in touch with the Dowds, she promised. Next, she told her father about Laura Pendleton's flight from the Aborns' home. Do you think we should report her experience with them to the police? She asked. Mr. Drew said no, that so far the 2 girls had only their suspicions of the couple's dishonesty, even though Laura had overheard them talking about her jewels. You need some concrete evidence before calling in the authorities, he stated. I thought I'd run up to Melrose Lake and do some sleuthing, she said. All right, but keep out of danger, he warned. I'll be eager to hear what you find out. We'll have a conference when I get home and decide what we can do for Laura. Thanks, Dad. A moment later, they bade each other good night and hung up. As the teenage detective started for the porch, she had an inspiration. It was not essential now for her to meet Herbert Brown. If Don Cameron would agree to take Laura as a substitute to the barbecue party, it would leave Nancy free to go to Melrose Lake the next day. I'll ask Don if he'd mind. If he does, well, that's that. Hopefully, Nancy dialed the Cameron house. Don answered, and the girl detective told him the problem. Wow, a real mystery, he remarked. If I didn't know what sleuthing meant to you, Nancy, I'd say you were just trying to brush me off. But you have me feeling sorry for this Laura Pendleton, too. Okay, if she's willing to go with me, I'll be glad to take her, but I'm sure sorry you can't make it. See you another time. Thanks, Dawn. I shan't forget this. Of course, if Laura won't go, I'll keep the date. Bye now. As Nancy walked toward the porch, she smilingly crossed her fingers, hoping that Laura would agree to the plan. Stepping outside, Nancy asked, How would you like to go to a barbecue tomorrow, Laura? The girl's face glowed with anticipation. It would be fun, she exclaimed. Where, Nancy? When the plan was explained, Laura said, Oh, but I don't want to take your date away from you. Dawn and I have already arranged everything, Nancy assured her. Then she told of her desire to do some sleuthing at Melrose Lake. At once, Laura said she was afraid to have Nancy go to the Aborns' house. There's no telling what my guardian might do to you, she said, fearfully. He has a terrible temper, and if he learns you're helping me—" "He won't learn that," Nancy said determinedly. Reluctantly, Laura agreed to Nancy's whole scheme. "But if anything should happen to you, I just want to die," she declared. Before the girls went to bed, Hannah suggested that Laura's jewelry be put into the wall safe in Mr. Drew's study. "Dad, Hannah, and I are the only persons who know the combination," Nancy told Laura. "It would be a good idea," the brown-eyed girl replied. "First, I'd like to show you some of Mother's treasures. She gave them to me before her last illness." "Do you have this in writing?" Hannah asked. "Yes, I do. Why?" "Then the jewelry wouldn't be part of your mother's estate," Mrs. Gruen answered. Excuse me. "And there'd be no tax on it." Laura took a package from her handbag and opened it. She displayed a string of priceless matched pearls, a gorgeous diamond clip and earrings, several jeweled pin sets with rubies, pearls, and emeralds, and 6 rings, including one with a brilliant star sapphire. Nancy and Hannah were astounded. "Why, this is the most beautiful collection I've ever seen!" Nancy exclaimed. She pointed to a ring set with a perfect aquamarine. "I love this!" Laura smiled. "That was Mother's favorite," she said. "My father gave it to her on their first wedding anniversary." "Thank goodness your guardian didn't find these things," Hannah declared. Finally, the jewels were put into the safe and everyone went to bed. Nancy awoke at 7 o'clock the next morning. After taking a shower, she decided to wear a forest green cotton dress and flat-heeled brown play shoes. Laura was still sleeping when Nancy joined Mrs. Gruen at breakfast. The housekeeper was using a cane. "My ankle feels almost as good as new," Hannah announced. "I've discarded the crutches." Nancy was delighted to hear this. As they ate, she and the housekeeper talked about the young sleuth's trip. "I'll worry about you every second until you return home," Mrs. Gruen declared. "If you're not here by 10:30, I'll notify the police." Nancy grinned. "I'll try to be here by supper time. If not, I'll call you." A short while later, Nancy battled the early morning traffic through the city. Reaching the outskirts, she took the road to Melrose Lake. Poor Laura, she thought, wondering what the day would disclose about the girl's strange guardian and his wife. Excuse me. If Laura were really penniless, maybe the man thought he had a legitimate right to take and sell the jewelry for the girl's support. But his wife had bragged about having plenty of money to take care of their ward. After a time, Nancy came to Melrose Lake Detour. Laura had told her there was a sign marked Eagle Rock in front of the lane leading to her guardian's property. Presently, Nancy approached the spot where the pine tree had fallen. Fortunately, it had been removed. She drove more slowly, afraid of inadvertently missing the Eagle Rock sign. Then, sighting the turnoff, Nancy left the detour. She had gone but a few hundred feet along the Aborns Road when she decided it might be safer to walk. After parking along the side of the roadway, she started off. In a few minutes, Nancy suddenly caught sight of a man walking rapidly through the wood. He carried a small bundle under his arm. "Jacob Aborn," she thought, recognizing his profile and the peculiar stoop of his shoulders. Nancy recalled Laura's story of her guardian taking a small package from the refrigerator and leaving the house with it. What was in the bundle, and where was he taking it? "I'm going to find out," Nancy declared. Without hesitation, she quietly plunged into the thicket. Following at a safe distance, she managed to keep the man in sight. He doesn't seem to be worried about being followed, Nancy thought. He must not have heard my car when I turned into the lane. She continued her musing. I'm glad I wore this green dress. It's good camouflage. Just then, a twig cracked under her foot, breaking the stillness of the woods. Jacob Aborn turned and looked back, frowning. He stood a minute, listening intently. Only by ducking quickly behind a large bush had Nancy avoided detection. I'd better be more careful if I don't want to get caught, she warned herself. As the man continued through the forest, Nancy followed, painstakingly avoiding twigs or loose stones. She kept well behind him. Wouldn't it be a joke on me if he's just a bird watcher? She giggled at the thought. And maybe that package has his lunch in it. Laughing to herself, Nancy picked her way through the woods as she trailed Laura Pendleton's guardian. Suddenly, he disappeared behind a clump of high blueberry bushes. Nancy hurried forward. When she reached the spot, the girl detective looked about in all directions. Which way did he go? She asked herself. Jacob Aborn seemed to have vanished into thin air.